Welcome to the Highland Wonders podcast, where we share stories and knowledge from experts about the charismatic species and diverse ecosystems of the Okanagan Highlands of north central Washington. My name is Jen Weddle, and I am a co-director of Okanagan Highlands Alliance, a nonprofit conservation organization dedicated to protecting the beautiful Okanagan Highlands, the traditional and ancestral lands of the Okanagan First Nations in British Columbia, and the Okanagan, Lynx, and Colville bands who are now part of the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation. The Okanagan, with its varied habitats and elevation ranges, is home to not one, not two, but 3 wild cat species: bobcats, cougars, and, did you know this? Lynx. These felines are all so elusive, so shy of humans, that those lucky few who catch a glimpse of one usually talk about it for years. The stories you hear probably sound something like this. So there I was, when suddenly I saw a flash of a body with a long tail, or a short tail, and then it was gone. These are bobcat stories and cougar stories. Lynx stories are rarer still. And this is the podcast where you get to find out why. Recently, we have had the good fortune to learn about 2 projects that are working to support lynx populations in the high elevation habitats of north central and eastern Washington. This podcast episode will be in 2 parts. It is an exciting mix of natural history, research projects, and the people who are studying lynx and who are actively working to reestablish lynx populations in their historic ecosystems. In this first part of our lynx mini-series, we will hear from Anna Makowitz, the Education Director of Home Range Wildlife Research. Anna and her team are experts in their field, and they work toward their goals by developing and implementing rigorous scientific studies in our far-flung area, incorporating education, training, and citizen science into all of their projects. In Part 2, we will feature Rose Piccinini, Senior Wildlife Biologist with the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation, who is leading a lynx augmentation project in the Kettle Range to the east of the Okanagan. As you learn all about the hows and the whos and the whys of these projects, you will also hear about the natural history of lynx and the high elevation systems that they rely on. Enjoy!
We've got moons on our shoulders and stars in our eyes. We know just what we're doing and we know it's right.
I'm Anna Makowitz. I'm the Education Director for Home Range Wildlife Research. There's a couple of projects that are really big for us right now. So the first one is our Lynx and Wildfire project, which this winter, we started in January, was like our first real field season of that. And the big question that we're asking there is, we know we have lynx here on the landscape, mostly in the mountains between, the Methow and the Okanagan. So it's a really cool intersection between the 2 valleys. Lynx, they're so well designed for even fluffy, deep snow conditions that they're able to move really efficiently. And they're really the only animal, other than maybe snowshoe hare, in our area that's able to manage in that kind of condition. I mean, moose are a good example this year, even just because we had so much snow and then it got so compacted. And we were, at the beginning of our field season in January, we were seeing moose in their normal areas, kind of up in the mountains. And then when that snow compacted, suddenly it was like a rush down to be down closer, to the valley bottom where the snow wasn't quite so restrictive of their movement. So I think, with this unpredictable weather, a lot of animals are going to be affected. Most of what's considered good lynx habitat, has been historically considered good lynx habitat, has burned in this area in the last 20 years. And we are seeing, just from being out on the landscape, doing other work, there are lynx here still. So they're using this burned landscape in varying degrees, and we really want to know how. So what what age of burn, what type of habitat that's regenerating, what are the characteristics of the landscape that the lynx are using when all they have to use is burned habitat. It's a huge effort. And so what we're doing there is, first and foremost, we're live trapping lynx to put GPS collars on them so that we can get really fine scale habitat data and see where they're going and what their home ranges are like and what kind of habitat that includes. And then we're also backtracking lynx, so following their trails backwards. And the reason for that is because they don't move very far in a day. So if you trail them in the direction that they're moving, it's possible you may influence their movement because you're sort of bumping them ahead of you.
How far do they move in a day?
Maybe 5 kilometers. Yeah, it's pretty small distances. And they can cover large distances, but they don't seem to in a day. So we trail them, backwards and take a lot of habitat data along the way. And so we have this fleet of volunteers. We need a huge team to do that. We certainly don't have the funding to pay a huge team to do that. And it's just a really great way for our community members to go somewhere they would never normally go and follow an animal that they would never normally follow or see ever in their lifetime, and have an intimate experience with that animal as they kind of travel the same route. Our trap line right now goes almost all the way to North 20 Mile, and we really want to continue going north and east because there are more cats over there. So we're already talking about how can we hire a crew that's stationed in Tenasket, and they can come over from that side and we can come over from this side and cover more lynx territory. But yeah, yesterday we caught our 3rd lynx of the season, which is wild. Our goal was to catch 1 this year, and we bought 4 collars just in case. And we caught 1 in early February, and we were like, great, we've got all this time. Maybe we'll catch 1 more. And so last week, actually, we did catch our 2nd one. So we have 2 males. Those first 2 were males. And then yesterday, caught a 3rd, which ended up being a female, which is really special because they're hard to catch. They're a little more discerning than the males, as you can imagine. And so it's a little harder to get them to walk into a trap, kind of take that risk. So we have this female, and she was in the trap, and there was another lynx sort of in the woods behind the trap, and it would occasionally come out and kind of look at her and then go back in the woods. And we weren't sure, before we got her out of the trap, we weren't sure, okay, did we catch a kitten and that's mom, or what's the relationship here? And so when we finally got her out and anesthetized her, we realized we have mom, we have an adult here, and which is fantastic. We don't really want to put collars on kittens as they continue to grow and they don't quite have an established home range, and they aren't the best study subjects. So that was really exciting. We did everything we needed to do, put her collar on, we put her back in the trap and gave her a reversal drug that wakes them up. And so she recovered in the trap. And as she was in there, the kitten, which, by then we realized it was a kitten, came back out from the woods again, was kind of hanging out nearby. And then we went to let her out of the trap, and she ran off to the nearest stand of trees and stopped, and then all of a sudden we see this kitten just running out to meet her, and they had a sweet little reunion in the trees and then walked off together. This was really cool to just know that they're out there romping around together.
Do you have any idea how many lynx there are in this particular area?
Not entirely. The estimate for the state is less than 50 animals. And of course Rose is working with the Colville to reintroduce lynx on the east side of the state. There's no lynx reintroduction being done over here, but clearly we've got a population that's moving probably from Canada in the Loomis and sort of up in the tripod burn areas where we see most lynx activity, as well as actually just got a report from somebody of lynx tracks in the Liberty Basin up the highway, and then kind of Goat Peak area too. There's seems to be a few lynx in that area, but other than that, unsure. We know there's at least 3 adults and a kitten.
Get another one.
We might get another one. And we've got just the one collar left.
Yeah.
Which is just crazy. It's beyond our wildest dreams. I mean, you trap other animals and it's like you're going to see them every day maybe in your traps. But we thought we would see one lynx this year. And so it's been a real treat to get to see more than one. We're just looking at some preliminary data from the first lynx that we collared. And his home range appears to be about roughly 19 kilometers, which is pretty small, actually, comparatively to lynx in other places. And so I'm not sure what that's about, or if we're just gathering new information about a different population that exists in different conditions. But yeah, usually they're much larger than that. Yeah, and they'll males will. They don't typically overlap in home range, but females will overlap in multiple male home ranges too. So there could be multiple cats in each sort of area that they exist. We've got about 40 traps out right now. And so to have...
They get checked every day.
They get checked every day. Yeah, so we're going up and over where the split is that goes either over Lone Frank Pass or over to Long Swamp.
Oh.
There's a split kind of way up and over towards you guys that we go there every day. And
wow. That's amazing. That's some devoted volunteers.
I know. And they will go out in any weather. They are like game for anything. It's
and so
impressive.
Is there a photo trap at all the traps too?
No, not right now. We've got a few just for like our own monitoring purposes. And those cameras, we've actually got 2 interns this summer, one from Whitman College and one from Western Washington this summer, helping us deploy those cameras. And so hopefully we'll have about 100 out on the landscape. And they'll have to, do a little project, and that internship opportunity will be a big boost for whatever it is that they may want to do afterwards. Yeah, so that's exciting. So they'll be mostly in charge of putting those cameras out. And then we'll probably have volunteers at some point. We need to change the battery and change the SD card out if they're going to be out all year. And in the wintertime, you have to raise them up so that they don't get buried in snow. And then in spring, bring them back down. So there's a whole slew of things to do with the camera. And so that's a place where we use volunteers. And we actually had put on a training program for that, a winter field skills training program that ended up being mostly our volunteers. They learned about avalanches, and they learned how to snowmobile, and they learned, they have all snowshoed before, but we've had students who've never even put snowshoes on before. So lots of just physical skills. And then, of course, on top of that is all the data collection requirements and keeping track of what's happening as you're trailing this lynx and what type of forest you're in, and all these different measurements that are important to our research that they have to keep track of, on top of remembering that, not to tip over the snowmobile in whatever these conditions, or so it's pretty complicated. We're really, really appreciative of this group of folks. So there's a lot. I mean, everything that I just mentioned for the Lynx project is like, we're trapping lynx and we're putting collars on and we're walking through the woods. But there's so much more to it than that. That's where training opportunities come in for us, not only for our volunteers, but, for anybody that might say, I want to do that, but I've never done it. And trapping is another huge skill set that we have to employ. And Carmen and I have been doing that for a long time independently, and then we've been working now for about 5 years together to trap various animals. And she's trapped lynx quite a lot before in Maine as well, so she's got a lot of experience there. But so you have to understand the behavior of these animals to know where to put a trap and how to attract them to the trap. And then once you have an animal in the trap, you have to know what to do with it, and how to handle it safely so that you can apply this GPS collar. We do anesthetize all of them. So we give them an injection of a drug, and then we have 40 minutes to get all of our work done and keep them warm and happy and healthy, and then wake them up and send them back out into the world. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So that's I mean, that's huge. To hold that responsibility in your hand is huge. And so that's something that we really focus on is, respect for the animal and taking that responsibility very seriously. The holy grail of work is to capture and handle an animal. The best thing that we can do for our wildlife is not handle them at all. Yeah. So things like camera traps are a really great non-invasive way to monitor them. So we'll put those on, certain locations on the landscape, and then they'll monitor all year long. And you can gain all kinds of information from photos.
All this research is so fascinating, and I just want to read it all and understand everything that happened. But does Home Range as an organization have like a vision for how the research should be used?
Yeah, definitely. We have a vision, and I hope we can make it happen, because it will take a lot of teamwork. Yeah, what we'd like to learn from this is how lynx are using the landscape and what specific habitats they're using, and for what specific behavior: denning, hunting, resting, traveling. And then if we can partner with Forest Service, and we've been talking with foresters about what sort of metrics they need from us to gather information to eventually come up with plans for the landscape that conserve the habitat that we have left and create opportunities for habitat to occur in the future. And what we're envisioning there is like prescribed burning would be a great way to do that. If we have a very specific plan for that, and then not only are we modifying the habitat in a way that hopefully works for lynx, by introducing smaller fires onto the landscape, we're actually reducing the amount of fuel that's out there, which means we're reducing the potential for these enormous mega fires that we've had over the last 20 years, coming through and just wiping out everything. So that's the broad vision. It's going to take a lot of partnership to get there, from not only from agencies and other scientists, but from our community and the public too, to understand why we might introduce fire on the landscape, which I think for those of us here, especially in the Okanagan, that's a scary thing to do. And that isn't just specifically for lynx, although that is a huge benefit. It will actually benefit all of us and the other, wildlife that exists out there too. Really would love to take this moment to thank our funders there, because we would not have made it into this field season without this funding from the Paul G. Allen Family Foundation. Is funding us for 3 years to do winter and summer work. And our vision for the Lynx project is 10 years plus. So, eventually we'll have to find more funding, but they've been our main funder there. So connecting with people who feel passionate about the work that we're doing and want to help in that way is a really big hurdle. We have a really amazing board of directors that are really invested. We actually just brought on 3 new people through an application process. And so we've got really interested board members. And then amazing support from the public as well. We opened up a fundraising campaign this year, and it's been wildly successful. And we were able to purchase 2 new snowmobiles, which has completely changed our world. We've been working with donated snowmobiles that a couple of them were 25 years old. Now we have these brand new snowmobiles that can fit 2 people, and they use less gas, and they're quiet, and they're safe. And so that has increased the efficiency of our work for sure. But all those little things that need to come together for the project to actually get off the ground. And that just takes a lot of work and a lot of collaboration. But yeah, we've had some incredible support that's made it possible. We're bringing on, so we're partnering with University of British Columbia as well. Dr. Karen Hodges, who was Carmen's grad advisor, is going to help us out here too. And so we're bringing on a couple of grad students that can contribute to the project as well. And of course, WDFW has been helpful, and the Conservancy here, just everybody's been really supportive.
This Lynx project is so cool, and it's so fun to learn about how all the pieces have come together. Could you share with us your story and how you came to be where you are today?
I grew up in Michigan. I am the daughter of a DNR employee there, retired now, but my dad was a park ranger for many, many years and park supervisor. And so being outside and interacting with nature in an intimate way was like just something that I did from the very beginning. And my mom was a registered nurse, which you could potentially bring the two things together into like where I've sort of ended up. You know, I had a strong interest in veterinary medicine growing up and worked in that field for a long time. Got my first job in a vet clinic at 16 and worked in vet clinics until I was, all the way through college. And somewhere in there realized that wasn't quite right. There was something missing and I hadn't quite identified it yet, but eventually I realized it was being outside. And so sort of fumbled around trying to connect all those interests and stumbled into the Conservation Corps. Was sort of my first leap into field work, and that eventually led to wildlife work. I worked in Canada for a winter trapping wolverines. Getting to see and touch and hang out with wolverines was really amazing. They're incredible creatures. And I've, worked with many, many other animals too that are just, it's very humbling to be around them and sort of see them in that environment. One story that comes to mind, I was surveying for spotted owls in Northern California for a summer. And so working nocturnally and had never seen a mountain lion before. I was with my work partner and we were in our truck and driving down a road, probably 2 or 3 in the morning, and came upon a mom, a female mountain lion, and her 2 cubs that were not itty bitty, but they were, they were starting to get bigger, but they still had, you could see some remnants of spots on them. And they actually, when they saw us coming, they split across the road. So mom went to one side and the 2 cubs went to the other side. And then they just stayed there because they really wanted to reunite. And we were, of course, sitting there watching them, but they would make these little chirping noises at each other. So we got to sit there and watch them, really, I think we stayed for 5 minutes or so, but haven't seen a mountain lion since. I'm just a field person, so I love being out in the field, and I love kind of, like I talked about before, that intersection of animals and the medical side of things, the veterinary side of things, and then being able to do that all kind of outdoors. Yeah, that's the top for me. And then being able to teach other people how to do that is really, really exciting too. And so that's how I came to be in this field and spent a long time traveling seasonally, doing seasonal field work, getting experience with lots of different species, and ended up here on the Washington Predator Prey Project, which was a big collaborative project between University of Washington and WDFW. And so I worked on that project, started in 2018, and pretty much went through the end of fieldwork, which was 2021. And that's where I met Carmen, who is our research director, Carmen Bambianchi, and Becca Wendell, who's our development director. And we all sort of had this opening after fieldwork ended for that project, and the PhD students went on to sadly sit at their computers, and we had kind of this space to figure out what was next for all 3 of us. And so we had sort of separately identified these gaps and then came together and agreed on them. And the vision of Home Range kind of came out of that. And that is to conserve wildlife through research, education, and community involvement. It's such a unique part of the state, part of the country, marries so many different species at their southern end of the northern species range and the northern end of southern species range. There's a lot of opportunity for research to happen out here, which translates to effective conservation. We took a long time to decide on our name, Home Range Wildlife Research, and threw around all kinds of things. Becca actually, we were, all 3 of us sitting around at the table, kind of our first official meeting, and tossing out all these names, and no, they're not really fitting. And very quietly, she was like, "How about Home Range?" And we're like, "What? That's so good!" And she said, "Well, it's the title of a book I'm working on." So we discussed that and made sure that, it wouldn't affect this book that she's been writing. And that's where we landed. It just felt right. And I think it fits for us too, because it's Okanagan, it's where we live, it's where we play and work, and it's what we know. So that's how we landed on that. There was a lot of support from the start, and then we just sort of took that and ran with it. Carmen really has a big interest in the entire research process. Becca has a passion for, well, bears in particular, but then she's really interested in outreach and community involvement, and how we bridge the gap there between what's happening in the research world and what people understand about what's going on out there. So that's the role that she fills for Home Range too. I sort of identified this gap in field skills. And so we have a field skills training program, which I'll talk a lot about today probably, but we all were seeing these really bright, educated young people coming out of their undergrad and sort of being thrown into a field job. That's kind of the first thing that you have to do when you're entering this field, is get some experience out there. But not everybody has experience in the outdoors even, and certainly not with like the tools that we use and the techniques that we need to employ out there. And so just seeing technicians come through our projects and training them and realizing this is a bigger gap than we realized. And not all of these people are coming with a dad that worked for the DNR or whatever it may be. They might not have spent much time outside of the city or outside of their home. And so, just providing some training opportunities for those people so that they're better equipped to do big things in their career. We've got a wildlife field techniques course, which is kind of the basics. We cover camera trapping or deploying remote cameras using telemetry, radio telemetry. We cover wildlife track and sign interpretation, kind of the basics there. And then we go over mortality site investigations and necropsies to try to determine how an animal died, essentially, is what question that you're usually answering there. So that's coming up in June. And then we have another session of that in September in Montana. And then we have an ethical live trapping course, which is new this year. And so that'll be just a couple days of all kinds of different trapping techniques for mammals, terrestrial mammals is what we focus on. And then paired with that, we have Dr. Mark Johnson, who's the founder and CEO of Global Wildlife Resources, who teaches chemical immobilization courses. So, which oftentimes you're doing with these wildlife species just to make sure that everybody is safe when you're handling them. And so he teaches a 3-day course on that. And so we'll be kind of co-hosting that with him.
If people are interested in your field trainings, they sign up online.
Yep. They can go to our website, and there's a whole field training section. So you can just choose the course that you want to go to and sign up there.
And people don't need to have any kind of background. They can they're all
just 18 plus. Yeah. Adult learners, but no background necessary. Last year we had our first course was this wildlife field techniques course, and we had recent graduates, and then we had some career transition people, maybe in their 40s or so, and then we had some retired folks who just wanted to see what it was all about. Each course is a little bit different, but like the wildlife techniques course, which I think is kind of the most comprehensive and basic one that we're gonna have, at least for the time being, is $750 this year. And that's one other thing that I'm working on is accessibility of training. In wildlife, typically your first field job is either not going to be paid at all, or you might get a volunteer stipend. It's going to be really low pay, and so that's a huge barrier for people. And so we want to try to bridge that gap, and we're learning and exploring ways to do that, because it's not a simple fix. I cringed a little bit because I did that, right? I actually had the privilege of being able to spend a couple of seasons at low pay, but I never would have been able to spend $750. Even today, that would be hard for me to do. And so I feel that personally, when we open up these courses. And so that's something that we aspire to do, is to offer scholarships or somehow get funding to subsidize these courses across the board so that they're just more accessible to a wider range of people. And, essentially what that boils down to is the more people and the more diverse people we can give access to training opportunities, which means they have a better chance of being successful as a wildlife biologist, the more of these really impactful and effective research projects we're going to have going on. And, conservation wins. A win for conservation is a win for everybody. And so I think, we keep that sort of broad scale in mind, but really want to figure out a way to, at that first, most basic level, bring people into the fold in a way that feels exciting and comfortable for them.
How do the training opportunities fit with the citizen science opportunities?
Especially the research arm and the community involvement arm overlap quite a bit, because we either need a lot of help with our research projects, or we design a research project that's, for community involvement. Community science, it takes a lot of training because usually they are not wildlife professionals, And so, there's a lot of training that goes into just having volunteers on your project. And so, some of those skills can be learned, if you come to a course, or we'll teach them, to our volunteers that are about to go out and help us with the project. We're dipping our toe into like youth education as well. So we've got a cub club at the elementary school here that we run in the wintertime. And then we're working with the Bush School a little bit too, to put on some educational programs for younger kids there. We have a bear project going on as well, which the Methow Conservancy has been a big partner for. Bears are probably the one species that we've worked with as home range so far that are a little bit controversial. And I think our best approach, not just us as an organization, but generally, is patience and education. And so I think listening to people, trying to figure out what their concerns actually are, and if there are educational tools that we can present to them that help them understand what's happening with this particular species and why, and what they can do to help mitigate that for their own sake or for the bear's sake, or whatever it is that they would prioritize there. Where we're actually looking at natural food abundance for black bears here, and where it occurs. And by that I mean berries, essentially, different species of berries, where they occur on the landscape, and from year to year, how successful they are in providing food, essentially, for bears. And then pairing that with some data around when and where bears are conflicting with humans down in the valley, in residential areas, and if an increase in what we call conflict, but like incidents down in the valley, is corresponding with like a low success rate of natural foods up where they would normally feed, or vice versa. If it's a good, successful natural food year, maybe we see less conflict in the valley. Just to track like what's happening out there on the landscape, why we might be seeing more trouble bears down here. So that was all designed with volunteers in mind. We're running these transects, 1 mile long transects, and recording all of the berry shrubs in abundance along those transects. I think we have something like 40 transects, and they need to be done once a month. So we kind of designed that as a community science project to get people out on our landscape, counting these berries and collecting really, really good data. And then, of course, we need to know about what's going on at people's homes or in town with their trash or anything, bird feeders and dog food, anything that like bears might come and rustle with and cause a problem. we're kind of tracking that as well. So having folks, submit those reports. So we're partnering with WDFW there too.
If you could see into the future, what do you hope that home range evolves into?
I hope, so there's 3 of us on staff, which I put that in quotes because we still volunteer a lot of our time. This is for Carmen and I, it's full time. Becca also has like she's got another business of her own on the side. She's very ambitious. I think adding more staff to help all of these programs that we have going become a little more sustainable, self-sustainable. And then of course, when do we wrap that up and sort of move it in a different direction to apply it to the landscape? Probably 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
And I think we're well on our way, having the support of the community and sort of being a known entity and being able to easily translate what's happening in our research to the people here down in the valley that will be affected by it. We're going to be transparent about that and have everybody's best interest in mind. So I do think that as we grow, perhaps like this is a great conversation for us to have about a volunteer base in the Okanagan that could go backtracking Lynx or whatever it is, whatever the project may be over there. So our website is homerange.org, and there's a contact form on there, or all our emails and phone numbers are out there, and like we welcome people to email or call anytime.
This podcast is produced by Okanagan Highlands Alliance. OHA is based in Tonasket, a town in the heart of the Okanagan Valley of north central Washington. We are inspired by the beauty and diversity of the landscape that surrounds us, from the aspen and conifer forests to the highland lakes to the tumbling creeks that descend to the wide, glacier-carved Okanagan River Valley. We engage in environmental advocacy, habitat restoration, and educational activities in our efforts to protect local ecosystems for future generations. To learn more about OHA or to become a member, please visit our website, okanaganhighlands.org. Thanks to Anna Makowitz for this fascinating conversation about home range wildlife research and the exciting strategies that they are using to conduct lynx and other wildlife research in Okanagan County. Home range is doing important and exciting work in a truly unique and often overlooked, for research anyway, part of this region. Check the episode notes for more information about how to connect with home range, field trainings, and volunteer opportunities. Our theme song, Blessed Unrest, is written and performed by Tyler Graves and Andy Kingham. You can support the artists by finding and downloading the full song from your favorite music platform.
Blessed unrest, blessed unrest.